The alarm blared through the medical frigate Horizon's grace at 3 in the morning. Dr. Nathan Pierce jerked awake in his quarters, his heart racing before his mind fully caught up. After 15 years working in space, his body still hadn't adjusted to emergency calls in the middle of sleep cycles. He pulled on his uniform and rushed to the command deck, his dark hair still messy from the pillow. The ship's corridors were dim, lit only by the soft blue emergency lights that guided crew members during night hours. His boots echoed against the metal floor as he ran. Commander Lisa Hayes was already on the bridge, staring at the main display screen with her arms crossed. She was a tall woman with sharp features and sharper instincts. She'd kept this crew alive through 3 years of border patrol, and she did it by being careful. Some said too careful, but careful people didn't die in space. "What's the situation?" Nathan asked, slightly out of breath. Lisa pointed at the screen. "Drukhari vessel damaged and drifting. Picked it up on long-range sensors about 20 minutes ago. It crossed into our territory, but it doesn't look like an attack run. The ship is barely functioning." Nathan stepped closer to the screen. The vessel was small, maybe a scout ship or a private transport. Scorch marks covered its hull, and one of its engine pods was completely gone. It tumbled slowly through space, trailing debris. "Life signs?" he asked. "2, both weak. 1 is critical." The sensor officer, a young man named Chris Martinez, looked up from his station. "The readings are strange, though. One signature is much smaller than typical Drukhari soldiers." Nathan's stomach tightened. "We need to help them." Lisa turned to face him, her expression hard. "That's a Drukhari ship, Nathan. We're supposed to report it and wait for command to decide what to do. They'll be dead by then. You said 1 is critical." "It could be a trap. The Drukhari aren't exactly our friends. Last month they attacked the supply convoy near the Outer Rim, killed 37 people." Nathan understood her caution. The Drukhari Empire and humanity had been in a cold war for decades. Sometimes it turned hot. Border skirmishes, attacks on civilian ships, sabotage. The Drukhari were a proud species. Dragon-like in appearance, with scales that could turn aside bullets and claws that could tear through steel. They were warriors by culture, and they didn't trust humans. But Nathan was a doctor. He'd taken an oath that didn't include exceptions for enemy species. "I'm going," he said firmly. "You can stay here if you want, but I'm taking a medical team and boarding that ship. If it's a trap, it's a pretty terrible one. That vessel can barely hold itself together." Lisa stared at him for a long moment. Nathan met her gaze without flinching. Finally, she let out a frustrated breath. "Fine, but I'm sending security with you. And if anything looks wrong, you aboard immediately. Understood?" "Understood." 30 minutes later, Nathan floated through the airlock connecting the Horizon's Grace to the damaged Drukhari vessel. He wore a full pressure suit just in case the alien ship lost what little atmosphere it had left. Behind him came Katie Morgan, his head nurse, and 2 security officers carrying stun weapons. The inside of the Drukhari ship was dark except for flickering emergency lights. The air was thin and smelled like burning metal and something else, something organic and sharp. Blood, Nathan realized. Drukhari blood. "This way," Katie said, checking her scanner. "Life signs are in the aft section." They moved through the narrow corridor carefully. The ship's design was different from human vessels, built for beings larger and stronger than people. The doorways were taller, the handholds positioned higher on the walls. Everything had a rough, almost organic quality to it, as if the metal had been grown rather than manufactured. Nathan heard a sound ahead, a low rumbling growl that made his hair stand on end. It was a warning, the kind of sound an animal makes when cornered and afraid. He held up his hand, signaling the others to stop. "Hello?" he called out. "We're here to help. Medical team from the human ship nearby." The growling stopped. Then a voice responded, speaking in heavily accented but understandable English. "Stay back. Stay away from him." "We're not going to hurt anyone," Nathan said, keeping his voice calm and gentle. "We picked up your distress signal. We know someone on this ship is badly injured. Please let us help." He moved forward slowly, rounding a corner into what looked like the ship's medical bay, and then he saw them. A young Drukhari male lay on a medical bed, his body covered in terrible burns. His scales, which should have been a deep blue color, were blackened and cracked. His breathing came in shallow, rattling gasps. Even without examining him closely, Nathan could tell he was dying. Standing over him was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 16 or 17 by human standards. Though Nathan knew Drukhari aged differently, She was smaller than the male, her scales a lighter shade of blue-green. Her golden eyes glowed in the dim light as she watched Nathan's team, and her claws were extended, ready to fight despite the exhaustion obvious in every line of her body. "My name is Nathan," he said softly. "I'm a doctor. That's Katie, she's a nurse. We want to help your friend. My brother," the girl said, her voice cracked. "His name is Kirith. He saved me. Our ship was caught in battle between your people and mine. We tried to escape, but—" She looked down at her brother and her fierce expression crumbled. "Please, please help him." Nathan approached slowly, his hands visible and empty. "I will do everything I can, but I need you to let me examine him. Will you trust me?" The girl stared at him for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly she retracted her claws and stepped back. "My name is Vera," she whispered. Nathan moved to Kirith's side and began his examination. It was worse than he'd feared. The burns covered more than 60% of the Drakari's body. His internal organs were damaged, his breathing compromised. Nathan had studied Drakari physiology as part of his xenomedicine training, but he'd never actually treated one before. Most encounters between humans and Drakari ended in combat, not cooperation. "Katie, get the portable stabilizer, and prep the transport stretcher. We need to get him to our medical bay immediately." "Nathan, is he going to live?" Vera asked. Nathan looked at her tear-stained face and saw something he recognized. Grief, fear, love. The same emotions he'd seen on countless faces across a dozen species. "Pain was universal. I don't know," he admitted. "But I promise you, I will try with everything I have." Vara nodded slowly. Then without warning, her legs gave out. She collapsed to the floor, unconscious from exhaustion and stress. "Katie, check her," Nathan ordered. While Katie examined Vara, Nathan and the security officers carefully moved Kirith onto the transport stretcher. The Drakari warrior was heavy, his body dense with muscle and reinforced bone. Even injured and dying, he was formidable. "She's just exhausted," Katie reported. "Dehydrated too. She's been trying to keep him alive by herself. There are signs she's been working for days without rest." "Bring her too," Nathan said. "She needs medical attention, and when she wakes up, she should be near her brother." As they transported both Drakari back to the Horizon's Grace, Nathan caught Lisa's voice over the comm. "Nathan, are you sure about this? We're bringing 2 Drakari onto our ship. If Command finds out—" "Then they find out," Nathan interrupted. "I'm a doctor, Lisa. That means something." "It has to mean something, or what are we even doing out here?" Lisa was quiet for a moment. "Just save them if you can. And Nathan, be careful. We still don't know their story." But as Nathan looked at Vera's unconscious form, her hand reaching out even in sleep toward where her brother lay, he thought he knew the most important part of their story already. They were family, and one of them was dying while the other would do anything to save them. That was a story Nathan understood perfectly. It was a story that crossed species, cultures, and wars. It was simply human. Or maybe he thought it was simply universal. The medical bay of the Horizon's Grace had never been designed for a patient like Kirith. The Drakari warrior was too large for a standard bed, so Nathan had pushed 3 of them together. Even then, Kirith's tail hung off the edge, the tip twitching occasionally with involuntary muscle spasms. Nathan had been working for 6 hours straight. His eyes burned from staring at monitors displaying alien physiology readings he was still learning to interpret. Sweat dripped down his forehead despite the cool air in the medical bay. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, but inside doubt gnawed at him. Drakari physiology was remarkably different from human biology. Their scales were more than just armor. They were part of their respiratory system, absorbing certain gases from the atmosphere and filtering out toxins. The burns covering Kirith's body weren't just destroying skin, they were destroying his ability to breathe properly. His internal organs were arranged differently too. The heart was in the center of the chest, protected by an extra layer of bone. His blood was copper-based rather than iron-based, giving it a blue-green color that looked strange in the medical tubes. The database Nathan had access to gave him basic information, but nothing about treating injuries this severe. "Blood pressure is dropping again," Katie said from her station. She'd been monitoring Kirith's vital signs, calling out changes so Nathan could adjust treatment in real time. "Increase the oxygen flow and give him another dose of the clotting agent. The modified one we use for Zentari patients. It might work on his blood chemistry." Katie prepared the injection and administered it carefully. They were working partly on knowledge and partly on educated guesses. Every treatment was an experiment. Every choice could be the wrong one. In the corner of the medical bay on a smaller bed, Vara sat watching. She'd woken up 2 hours after they'd brought her aboard, disoriented and frightened. When she'd seen her brother on the beds, tubes and wires connected to his body, she'd tried to rush to him. Katie had gently but firmly guided her back, explaining that Nathan needed space to work. Since then, Vera had been sitting perfectly still, her golden eyes never leaving her brother's form. She hadn't spoken. She barely seemed to breathe. She just watched with an intensity that was almost painful to witness. "Vera," Nathan said gently, not looking away from his work. "Can you tell me what happened? How did Kyreth get injured? Understanding the cause might help me treat the damage." For a long moment, Vara didn't respond. Nathan thought maybe she hadn't heard him or didn't want to answer. Then in a quiet voice, she began to speak. "We are not soldiers. Kyreth was... She stopped, correcting herself with difficulty. Kyreth is a researcher. He studies old things, ancient ruins from civilizations that existed before our people or yours traveled the stars. I am his assistant. I help him with his work." Nathan nodded, encouraging her to continue while his hands worked on repairing damaged tissue using a laser scalpel. "We found something on a dead planet called Oryx 9. Old structures, very old. We were documenting them when the fighting started. Human ships and Drakari ships. We do not know who fired first. We only know that suddenly there were weapons firing everywhere and we were caught in the middle." Her voice grew quieter, tinged with guilt. "Kyreth told me to run to our ship. I did. But when I got there, I realized he was not behind me. I looked back and saw him still at the ruins gathering our research data. He would not leave it behind. All his work. Years of work." She paused, and Nathan could hear her struggling to control her emotions. A plasma blast hit near him. The explosion threw him against the rocks. When I reached him, his body was burning. The plasma fire sticks to scales, keeps burning. I dragged him to the ship. I put out the fires with my own hands. Nathan glanced at her briefly and saw the burns on her palms, less severe than her brother's but still painful. We tried to escape the battle, but our ship was damaged. Another blast hit our engines. We drifted for 3 days before crossing into your territory. I tried to treat Kyreth, but I am not a medical expert. I did not know how to help him. You kept him alive, Nathan said firmly. That's what matters. You got him here, and now I'm going to do everything I can to save him. But even as he spoke those words, Nathan felt the weight of uncertainty. Kyreth's condition was deteriorating. The treatments that should have stabilized him were only slowing his decline, not stopping it. His body was shutting down, organ by organ. Katie caught Nathan's eye and gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. She'd been a nurse long enough to recognize when a patient was beyond saving. Nathan saw the message in her expression but refused to accept it. "No," he said quietly. "We're not giving up. Pull up the comparative xenobiology database. Find me something. Any species with similar physiology. Maybe there's a treatment protocol we haven't considered." He worked through the night with Katie at his side. They tried experimental treatments, mixing medications approved for 3 different species. They adjusted his atmospheric intake 5 times, trying to find the right balance of gases that his damaged scales could process. They used regeneration stimulators designed for Zentari patients, hoping the technology would translate. Vera watched it all. At some point, Katie brought her food and water. Var ate mechanically without tasting, her focus never leaving her brother. She drank only when Katie pressed the cup into her hands. "Why do you help us?" Vara asked suddenly, breaking hours of silence. "We are enemies. Your people and mine have killed each other for decades. You could have left us to die on our ship. Why risk your lives for us?" Nathan paused in his work, considering the question. "Because that's what doctors do," he said simply. "I don't see enemies when I look at sick or injured people. I see patients who need help. That's all. Not all humans think like you." "No," Nathan admitted. "Not all do. And not all Drakari would help a human in need either, I imagine. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Someone has to be the first to show compassion. Otherwise, the fighting never stops." Vara was quiet for a moment. "You are strange for a human," Nathan smiled tiredly. "I've been told that before." As dawn approached by the ship's chronometer, Kyreth's vital signs began to spike erratically. His body was fighting, but it was losing. Nathan pushed himself harder, trying everything he could think of, but medicine had limits. Technology had limits. Sometimes, despite everything you did, death won anyway. Suddenly, Kareth's eyes opened. They were cloudy with pain, but aware. His gaze found Vara and he tried to speak. His voice was barely a whisper, and he spoke in the Drakari language, words Nathan couldn't understand. Vara rushed to his side, taking his hand carefully to avoid the burns. She responded in their native tongue, tears streaming down her face. The conversation was brief. Kareth's strength was fading fast. Then Kareth turned his head slightly, looking at Nathan. His mouth moved, forcing out words in broken English. "Protect us, sister, please." "I will," Nathan promised. "I swear it." Kareth's eyes closed. The monitors began to alarm as his vital signs plummeted. Nathan worked frantically, trying to restart his heart, trying to force life back into the failing body. But it was too late. The damage was too severe, and Kareth's body had nothing left to give. At 6:37 in the morning, Kareth died. The sound Vara made was unlike anything Nathan had ever heard. It started low, a rumble deep in her chest, then rose to a piercing cry that echoed through the entire ship. It was grief-given voice, pure and primal. It was the sound of a heart breaking. She collapsed over her brother's body, her whole frame shaking with sobs. Katie moved to comfort her, but stopped when Nathan shook his head. Some grief was too profound for comfort. Sometimes people needed to feel the full weight of their pain. Nathan stood back, watching the young Drakari girl cry over her brother's body. He felt the familiar ache of failure, the guilt that came with losing a patient. He'd known Kareth might die. He'd prepared himself for it, but preparation didn't make it hurt less. Katie touched his shoulder gently. "You did everything you could. It wasn't enough. It never feels like it is. But Nathan, you gave him a chance. And you gave her hope, even if just for a few hours. That matters," Nathan nodded slowly. He'd been a doctor long enough to know Katie was right. But that knowledge didn't ease the pain of failure. It never did. Vara sat beside her brother's body for 3 hours without moving. The medical bay had been cleared of everyone except Katie, who kept a respectful distance but remained nearby in case Vara needed anything. Nathan had left to file his report and speak with Commander Hayes, but his promise to Kareth weighed heavily on his mind. When he returned, he found Vara finally stirring. She'd stopped crying, though her eyes were red and swollen. She stood slowly, running her hand gently along her brother's arm one last time. Then she turned to face Nathan, her expression composed despite the obvious pain in her eyes. "I must ask something of you," Vara said, her voice rough from crying. "I know I have no right to ask for more than you have already given, but I must honor my brother properly. I need your help to do this." Nathan stepped closer. "What do you need?" "In my culture, when a warrior dies far from home, we perform the rite of ascending flames. The body must be cremated in a sacred manner, and the ashes scattered into space at dawn while prayers are sung. This allows the spirit to rise and find its way to the eternal sky, where our ancestors wait." She paused, struggling with what came next. "But the rite must be performed at a holy site. The nearest one is in Drakari territory, 3 days' journey from here. It is a moon called Talshara, where ancient temples stand. Without this rite, Kareth's spirit will be lost. He will wander the void between stars forever, unable to find peace." Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. He understood what she was asking even before she finished speaking. "I have no ship," Vara continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I have no way to reach Talshara, but I cannot leave my brother's spirit to suffer. Please, Dr. Nathan, please help me take him home." Before Nathan could respond, Commander Hayes' voice came over the intercom. "Dr. Pierce, report to my ready room immediately." Nathan looked at Vara. "Wait here. I'll be back soon." In Hayes' ready room, the commander was standing by the window looking out at the stars. She didn't turn when Nathan entered. "I heard the Drakari male died," she said. "I'm sorry. I know you tried." "Thank you. Now we need to figure out what to do with the girl and the body." Hayes turned to face him. "I've contacted Drakari authorities through neutral channels. They're sending a ship to pick up their citizens. Should be here in about 4 days. Vara asked me for help with a funeral rite," Nathan said carefully. Hayes' expression hardened. "Let me guess. She wants us to take her into Drakari space, to a moon called Talshara. It's a holy site." "Absolutely not." Hayes' voice was firm. Taking a military vessel into Drakari territory would be an act of war. We'd be intercepted before we got halfway there. My crew could be killed or captured. Do you understand what you're asking? I'm not asking anything yet. I'm just telling you what she requested. The answer is no, Nathan. It's not happening. We'll preserve the body, and when the Drakari ship arrives, they can handle their own funeral arrangements. That's the only logical solution. Nathan knew she was right. From a military and political standpoint, Hayes' decision made perfect sense. But he also remembered Vera's face when she'd explained what would happen to her brother's spirit without the proper rites. He remembered the promise he'd made to Kyreth in those final moments. What if there was another way? Nathan asked. What do you mean? What if we could perform the rite here on this ship? Adapt it to our circumstances? Hayes stared at him like he'd suggested flying directly into a sun. You want to hold a Drakari religious ceremony on a human military vessel? I want to help a girl honor her brother's death. Is that really so impossible? Nathan, we don't know anything about their rituals. We don't have the right facilities. We don't have whatever sacred items they need. And most importantly, she won't accept it. You heard her. It has to be at a holy site. Maybe. Or maybe the spirit of the rite matters more than the exact location. People have been adapting religious ceremonies for centuries. Humans buried at sea instead of in family plots. Cremations in different countries than where people were born. We find ways to honor our dead no matter where we are. Hayes rubbed her temples, a headache clearly forming. Even if I agreed to this, which I haven't, the girl would never accept it. She was very specific about what she needs. Let me talk to her. Let me try. And if she refuses, then we tried. But at least we tried. Hayes was silent for a long moment, considering. Finally, she sighed. You have 24 hours to convince her. If she agrees, we'll do our best to accommodate the ceremony. But Nathan, if this goes wrong, if it causes a diplomatic incident, that's on you. Understood. Nathan returned to the medical bay, where Vera still sat beside her brother's body. Katie had draped a blanket over Kyreth's form, a small gesture of respect. Vera, can we talk? Nathan asked gently. She looked up at him with hope in her eyes. You will help me reach Telshara? No, I'm sorry, but we can't do that. Taking our ship into Drakari space would cause serious problems between our peoples. People could die because of it. Vera's expression crumbled. Then Kyreth is lost. His spirit will wander forever, maybe not. I have another idea. Please just listen. Nathan sat down across from her and began to explain his proposal. At first, Vara shook her head, refusing to even consider it. The rite had to be performed correctly at a proper holy site or it meant nothing. But Nathan persisted, speaking quietly and carefully. He talked about the nature of ritual and meaning. He explained how humans had adapted their own death ceremonies throughout history, how the core intention mattered more than rigid adherence to tradition. Your brother was a researcher, right? He studied ancient civilizations. Do you think those civilizations never adapted their practices? Do you think their rituals stayed exactly the same for thousands of years? That is different, is it? Var, look at where you are. You're on a human ship in neutral space far from any Drakari holy site. Your brother died among strangers who tried to save him. These are not the circumstances anyone would choose. But we work with what we have. It will not be the same. No, it won't be the same. But it can still be meaningful. It can still honor him. And most importantly, it means you'll be there to perform the rites. If you wait for a Drakari ship to take you home, you'll be traveling for days. Will his body last? Will you be able to perform the ceremony properly by then? Vara looked at her brother's covered form, uncertainty written across her face. Tell me what you propose exactly. Nathan explained his idea in detail. They would use the ship's observation deck, which had large windows overlooking space. They would perform the cremation using their facilities, following Drakari practices as closely as possible. Then they would release Kyreth's ashes into a nearby nebula, a stellar nursery where new stars were being born. The nebula represents creation and renewal, Nathan said. New stars being born from cosmic dust. It's not the same as your holy site, but it carries similar symbolism. Transformation, rebirth, eternal light. I do not know the prayers well enough, Vara admitted quietly. Kyreth was the scholar. He knew all the old words. I only know fragments. Then we'll use the fragments you know. And where you don't know the words, speak from your heart. Tell your brother what he meant to you. Say goodbye in your own way. Grief doesn't have a script, Vara. Love doesn't need perfect words. Vara sat in silence for a long time, wrestling with the decision. Nathan could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to refuse, to insist on the traditional way. But she also understood the reality of her situation. She was alone, far from home, with limited options. Finally, she spoke. Kyrith told me once that the purpose of rituals is not to please the gods or satisfy tradition. He said rituals exist to help the living process grief and honor those they've lost. He said the meaning we give to actions matters more than the actions themselves. She looked up at Nathan with tears in her eyes. He would tell me to accept your offer. He would tell me that your kindness and effort mean more than any temple or ancient rite. So you'll let us help? Vara nodded slowly. Yes, but I need time to prepare. And I need help understanding what I must do. You'll have whatever you need, Nathan promised. Over the next hours, Nathan worked with Vara to plan the ceremony. She explained the basic structure of the rite of ascending flames, and Nathan took notes. Katie helped gather materials and prepare the observation deck. Chris Martinez from the sensor station volunteered to help with the technical aspects of releasing the ashes into space at the right moment. As they worked, Nathan noticed something. The crew members who heard about the ceremony started volunteering to help. They brought flowers from the ship's small garden. They offered to dim the lights and adjust the observation deck settings. Lisa Hayes herself came down to check on preparations and, to Nathan's surprise, offered suggestions for how to make the space feel more ceremonial. I still think this is unusual, Hayes said to Nathan privately, but I also think it's right. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking protocol. That night, Nathan visited Vara one last time before the ceremony. She was practicing the prayers she remembered, her voice soft and uncertain. Are you ready? He asked. No, Vara admitted, but I do not think anyone is ever truly ready to say goodbye to someone they love. We do it anyway because we must. Nathan nodded, thinking of all the times he'd stood beside grieving. Nathan spent most of the night in his quarters, reading everything he could find about Drakari death rituals. The database available to him was limited, mostly compiled from anthropological observations and intercepted cultural transmissions. But he absorbed every detail, making notes and comparing different sources. The rite of ascending flames was ancient, dating back thousands of years to when the Drakari first left their homeworld and spread across the stars. The ceremony had three main components: purification, release, and remembrance. Purification involved preparing the body, washing it with water from sacred springs while prayers were spoken. Release meant cremation, transforming the physical form into ash and smoke that would rise to join the cosmos. Remembrance required family members to share stories and memories, ensuring the deceased would never be forgotten. At 3 a.m, Katie found him still awake, surrounded by data pads and handwritten notes. You should sleep, she said. The ceremony's in a few hours. I need to get this right, Nathan replied, rubbing his tired eyes. Vara is trusting us with something incredibly important to her culture. I can't mess it up. Katie sat down across from him. Nathan, you're a doctor, not a priest. You've already done more than anyone would expect. You don't have to be perfect. I made a promise to her brother. I know, and you're keeping that promise. But you're also just a person, doing the best you can with limited resources and no training in alien religious ceremonies. That has to be enough. Nathan knew she was right, but the weight of responsibility still pressed heavily on him. He'd spent his entire career trying to save lives. Now he was being asked to honor a death properly, and the stakes felt just as high. At 6 a.m, Nathan finally allowed himself an hour of sleep. When he woke, the ship was already preparing for the ceremony. The observation deck had been transformed. The harsh overhead lights had been replaced with softer, warmer lighting that mimicked sunrise. Crew members had arranged what flowers the ship had in careful patterns on the floor. Someone had even brought up a small table to serve as an altar. Commander Hayes had done more than Nathan expected. She'd authorized the use of the ship's cremation facilities and arranged for a specialized container that could hold Kyrith's ashes and release them in a controlled manner into space. She'd also quietly spread the word among the crew that this was a solemn occasion, and everyone should treat it with respect. Nathan found Vara in her temporary quarters, preparing for the ceremony. Katie had helped her clean and repair Kyrith's flight suit, and Vara wore pieces of it as a mark of honor. She'd also marked her face with traditional mourning patterns using medical dye that Katie had helped her prepare. How are you holding up? Nathan asked. I am frightened, Vera admitted. What if I do this wrong? What if I fail him? You won't fail him. Vara, your brother knew you loved him. That's what matters. The rest is just ceremony. In my culture, ceremony is important. It connects us to our ancestors and our beliefs, and we're going to honor that as best we can. But remember what you told me your brother said. The meaning matters more than the actions. You being here, saying goodbye, remembering him with love, that's what will help his spirit find peace. Vara nodded slowly, trying to draw strength from his words. At 7 o'clock, by the ship's chronometer, the ceremony began. Nearly half the crew had gathered in the observation deck, standing in respectful silence along the walls. Commander Hayes stood near the entrance, her uniform crisp and her expression solemn. Kyreth's body had been prepared according to Drakari customs as best as they could manage. He was wrapped in clean white cloth, his form laid on a platform near the viewing window. Beyond the transparent barrier, the nebula glowed in shades of pink and orange and deep purple, clouds of gas and dust lit by the birth of new stars. Vera stood before her brother's body, and for a moment she couldn't speak. The weight of grief and responsibility seemed to freeze her. But then Nathan stepped up beside her, a quiet presence offering support, and she found her voice. She began with the traditional prayers, speaking in the Drakari language. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger as she continued. The words were beautiful even to those who couldn't understand them, rising and falling in rhythmic patterns that spoke of something ancient and sacred. Nathan had researched the prayers enough to recognize some of the phrases. She was asking the spirits of ancestors to guide Kyreth. She was telling the cosmos to receive him with honor. She was promising that his memory would live on through her. When she reached parts of the ritual she didn't know, Vera paused. Nathan could see the panic in her eyes. But then she did something brave. She began to speak from her heart, still in her native language, telling her brother things she needed him to know. She talked about how he'd protected her their entire lives, how he'd taught her to see wonder in ancient ruins and forgotten civilizations, how his curiosity about the universe had inspired her own love of learning. She told him she was sorry she couldn't save him. She promised she would continue his research. She said goodbye. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the observation deck. Even crew members who'd never met Kyreth, who saw Drakari as enemies, felt the weight of her grief and love. The cremation was handled off-screen, with dignity and care. When it was complete, Nathan brought the container holding Kyreth's ashes to Vara. The container was simple but elegant, made of brushed metal with Drakari symbols etched into its surface. Katie had worked with the ship's engineer to create it specially for this ceremony. It's time, Nathan said gently. Vera took the container in both hands and approached the airlock mechanism that had been specially configured for this moment. Chris Martinez worked the controls, creating a small controlled opening to space. As the first light of what the ship designated as dawn touched the observation deck windows, Vara opened the container. The ashes drifted out into the vacuum, caught immediately by the solar wind and the gravitational pull of the nearby nebula. Something remarkable happened. As the ashes entered the radiation field surrounding the stellar nursery, they began to glow. The particles caught fire in the intense light of forming stars, creating thousands of tiny sparks that drifted like fireflies into the cosmic clouds. It was more beautiful than anyone had expected. The ashes seemed to dance as they dispersed, glowing brighter and brighter before finally fading into the nebula's embrace. It looked exactly like what Vera had described, a spirit ascending to join the eternal sky. Vera sang the final blessing, her voice clear and strong now. The song was wordless, just pure sound rising and falling like wind through canyons. It was haunting and beautiful, and it filled the observation deck with something beyond grief. It felt like transcendence. When the last of the ashes had dispersed and the song ended, Vera stood silently for a moment, staring at the nebula where her brother now rested. Then she turned to Nathan. What happened next shocked everyone in the room. Farah placed her clawed hand over her heart, then extended it toward Nathan in a gesture of profound significance. She spoke in English, her voice formal and carrying the weight of tradition. I, Farah of the bloodline Talshir, perform the Tarakshal before these witnesses. Dr. Nathan Pierce has honored my brother's death when he could have refused. He has shown compassion when he could have shown indifference. He has treated us as people worthy of dignity when we were enemies in the eyes of many. She pressed her hand to her chest again. I declare a life debt. From this day forward, Nathan Pierce has my loyalty and my protection. Should he need me, I will come. Should he be threatened, I will defend him. This I swear by the ancestors and by the eternal sky. Nathan stood frozen, not entirely understanding what had just happened, but recognizing its importance. Commander Hayes stepped forward. Is this binding? Hayes asked quietly. Among my people, the Tarek Shal is sacred, Vara explained. It cannot be revoked or refused. It is given freely but lasts until death. I don't need you to swear any debts to me, Nathan said. I just wanted to help. I know. That is why you are worthy of this oath. Before anyone could say more, the communications officer's voice came over the intercom. Commander Hayes, we're receiving a transmission from a Drakari vessel. They say they've been monitoring us and wish to speak with you immediately. The mood in the observation deck shifted instantly. A Drakari ship nearby meant potential danger. Hayes's hand instinctively moved to her sidearm. I'll take it in the command center, she said. Then she looked at Vara. You should come too. They might want to speak with you. In the command center, the main screen showed a Drakari officer in full military regalia. He was older, his scales dark with age, and his expression was difficult to read. I am Elder Commander Draken of the Imperial Fleet, he said, his English accented but clear. We have been monitoring your vessel since you recovered our citizens from the damaged scout ship. We meant no intrusion into your affairs, Hayes began carefully. We responded to a distress signal and provided medical assistance. We are aware. We watched as your doctor attempted to save the life of Kireth, son of the Talshir bloodline. We witnessed his death, and we have now observed the funeral rites you performed for him. The Drakari commander's expression softened slightly, which was... The Drakari escort ship arrived exactly when Elder Commander Draken had promised. It was sleek and impressive, much larger than the Horizon's Grace, with weapons that could probably reduce the human vessel to scrap in minutes. But it approached peacefully, its weapon systems powered down in a gesture of goodwill. Vara stood in her temporary quarters, gathering the few possessions she had. Most of what she and Kireth had brought with them had been destroyed when their ship was damaged. All she had left were some research notes, a few personal items, and the memories of her brother. Katie knocked on the doorframe. May I come in? Yes, please. Katie entered carrying a small package wrapped in simple cloth. The crew put something together for you. It's not much, but we wanted you to have something to remember your time here. Vera unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was a data pad containing photos of the funeral ceremony, including images of Kireth's ashes glowing as they dispersed into the nebula. There was also a small metal plate engraved with Kireth's name in both English and Drakari script, and the date of the ceremony. We thought you might want to have documentation of the rite, Katie explained, so you could show your family that he was honored properly. Vara held the items carefully, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Thank you. This means more than you know. Your brother was lucky to have a sister who loved him so much. I was lucky to have him as a brother, Vera corrected, and lucky to meet people like you and Dr. Nathan when I needed help most. There was a moment of quiet between them, the kind of comfortable silence that forms between people who've shared something profound. Will you be all right? Katie asked. Going back to your people after everything that's happened? I do not know, Vara admitted honestly. I will grieve for a long time, but I will also continue Kireth's work. That is the best way to honor him, and I will never forget what your people did for us. Some of our people, Katie corrected gently. Not everyone would have made the same choice Nathan did. That is true of any species, but the ones who make the kind choices are the ones who matter most. When it was time to leave, nearly the entire crew of the Horizon's Grace assembled in the docking bay to see Vera off. It was an unusual show of respect for someone who, just days ago, would have been considered an enemy. Commander Hayes approached Vera first. Safe travels, and thank you for trusting us to help with your brother's rights. It was an honor. The honor was mine, Commander. You and your crew showed my people that humans can be more than just enemies. That is a rare gift. Hayes nodded and stepped back. Other crew members approached, offering brief words of condolence or farewell. Some simply nodded respectfully. All of them had been touched by what they'd witnessed. Finally, Nathan came forward. Vara looked at him with an expression that held both gratitude and sadness. I do not know how to thank you properly, she said. You tried to save my brother's life. When you could not, you honored his death. You kept your promise to him. You protected me, not just physically, but from the pain of watching him be treated without dignity. I'm just glad I could help, even in a small way. It was not a small way. You gave me the greatest gift possible, peace of mind about my brother's spirit. That is everything. She reached out and took his hand, a gesture that made several crew members tense. Drakari claws could be deadly weapons, but Vara's touch was gentle, almost reverent. The Tarek shawl I swore is binding, she said. If you ever need help, send word. I will come no matter the distance or danger. This I promise. I hope I never have to call on you for that, Nathan said with a slight smile. But I'll remember the offer. I hope we meet again, Dr. Nathan Pierce, in better circumstances where no one is dying and no one is grieving. I would like to show you some of the ruins Kyreth and I studied. I think you would appreciate their beauty. I would like that very much. Vara released his hand and stepped back. She bowed deeply, a formal Drakari gesture of respect, then turned and walked toward the airlock where Drakari officers waited to escort her to their ship. At the threshold, she paused and looked back one last time. Tell your people that not all Drakari are warriors seeking conflict. Some of us are scholars and seekers of knowledge. Some of us value life and honor and compassion. Perhaps someday our peoples can remember that about each other. Then she was gone, the airlock sealing behind her. The crew stood in silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then slowly they began to disperse, returning to their duties. But something had changed. Nathan could see it in their faces. They'd witnessed something that challenged their assumptions about the enemy they'd been trained to fear. Later that day, Nathan sat in his quarters writing his official report. It was difficult to capture everything that had happened in clinical, professional language. How did you explain the emotional weight of a funeral ceremony for an alien? How did you quantify the value of showing compassion to a grieving sister? He did his best, sticking to facts and timelines, but he added a personal note at the end. The events of the past days have reminded me why I became a doctor. I took an oath to help those in need, regardless of who they are or where they come from. I believe that oath extends beyond species and politics. Kyreth and Vera were not enemies when they lay injured on that damaged ship. They were patients who needed help. They were a brother and sister who loved each other. In treating them as such, we not only honored our own values, but potentially opened a door to better relations with the Drakari Empire. Sometimes the most important diplomatic breakthroughs happen not in grand negotiations, but in small acts of human decency. He submitted the report to Commander Hayes and waited to see what would happen. Would he face punishment for taking such risks? Would there be political consequences? The next morning, Hayes called him to her ready room. Nathan entered expecting a reprimand. Instead, he found her smiling slightly. I just got off a call with Fleet Command, she said. They're not entirely happy about how you handled things. You broke about a dozen protocols and put my ship in a potentially dangerous situation. Nathan's heart sank. I understand. I take full responsibility. Let me finish, Hayes interrupted. They're not happy about the protocol violations, but they're very interested in the results. The Drakari Empire has never granted safe passage to a human vessel before. You've accidentally created a diplomatic opportunity that our ambassadors have been trying to achieve for years. She leaned back in her chair. The diplomats are already talking about using what happened here as a framework for better relations. They want to establish medical exchange programs, cultural education initiatives, things like that, all because you decided to help a girl bury her brother. I wasn't trying to create a diplomatic incident, Nathan said. I just wanted to do the right thing. I know, and that's what makes it so effective. Vara and the Drakari leadership recognized your sincerity. They knew you weren't acting out of political calculation. You were just being human in the best sense of that word. Hayes stood and extended her hand. Thank you, Dr. Pierce. You reminded me and this crew that compassion isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest thing we can offer. Nathan shook her hand, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. Over the following weeks, word of what happened spread through both human and Drakari space. Some on both sides criticized the decision to perform the ceremony, calling it everything from a waste of resources to a betrayal of war dead. But others saw it differently. Nathan started receiving messages from other doctors in the fleet, thanking him for standing by medical ethics even when it was difficult. He heard from soldiers who said the story had made them think differently about the Drakari. He even received a formal letter from the Drakari Medical Council, expressing interest in opening communication with human medical professionals. Most surprisingly, he received a message from Vera herself 3 weeks after she'd left. It was a video transmission, showing her standing in what looked like a research facility. "Dr. Nathan," she said, her English much improved, "I wanted you to know that I shared the documentation of Kyreth's funeral with our family and our people. My mother wept when she saw how beautifully you honored him. She asked me to send her gratitude to you and your crew." Vera smiled, and it was the first time Nathan had seen her look truly peaceful. "I have returned to Kyreth's research. I am cataloging his findings and preparing his work for publication. It is painful sometimes, working with his notes and knowing he will never add to them, but it also feels right. His discoveries will be shared with our people and perhaps someday with yours as well." She paused, her expression becoming more serious. "There is something else. The Elder Council has established a new initiative. They are creating exchange programs between human and Drakari medical teams. They cited your actions as inspiration for this program. You have done more to bring our peoples together than decades of diplomatic negotiations." Vara placed her hand over her heart. "I have not forgotten the Tarek Shal. The debt remains, but I also consider you a friend now, if I may be so bold. I hope we meet again under the stars, sharing knowledge rather than suspicion." The message ended and Nathan sat back in his chair, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real, tangible hope for a better future.